Once a Soho House basic, always a Soho House basic bitch.
Jeffrey Epstein was also Harvey Weinstein, very prominent. There were members. Meghan Markle was just one of the working girls for Soho House. Call girl, working girl, escort, whatever you want to call it. That's what she was.
Meghan has always had this very, very strange fascination with Soho House, very much this weird obsession with it.
Back in her early days, she was totally reliant on Soho House to pay for her travel, to pay for her accommodation.
This guy has been around all of the time. Isn't that suspicious to you? Because it is for me. It is something that's strange.
Without Markus Anderson, I hope to prove to you in this video that Meghan Markle wouldn't have the level of global fame that she enjoys now.
They say power isn't always inherited. Sometimes it's engineered. And in Meghan Markle's story, the man behind that quiet engineering wasn't a prince, wasn't a producer, and wasn't a politician. It was a man named Markus Anderson, the elusive social architect who seemed to know exactly which door to open and when. Before the royal gowns, the Netflix deals, or the palace scandals, Meghan was just another face in the crowd. A struggling actress, hustling between auditions and rejection letters in Los Angeles. But what set her apart wasn't talent alone. It was precision. Meghan understood that in the world she wanted to conquer, influence was the new currency. And Markus Anderson, the charismatic gatekeeper of Soho House, was the banker. Markus wasn't born into privilege. Raised in Ontario, he had no family fortune, no aristocratic lineage, only a magnetic charm and an almost preternatural gift for making powerful people feel chosen. When he joined Soho House London, the world's most secretive club for the rich and the restless, he didn't just manage parties. He curated power, one introduction at a time. He built an invisible empire. Politicians, CEOs, actors, royals, all orbiting around the quiet Canadian, who always seemed to be in the right place, beside the right name. By the time Meghan met him, Markus had already perfected his role as the ultimate connector. She wasn't the first ambitious actress to walk into a Soho lounge, but there was something about her that caught his attention. Meghan wasn't desperate for fame. She was determined to design it. She understood presentation, how to perform warmth, how to mirror a room. Markus saw in her what few others did, the potential to move beyond Hollywood's shallow stardom into the world of global influence. Their connection wasn't romantic, at least not in the way tabloids love to imply. It was transactional, magnetic, and quietly calculated. Meghan provided charm and hunger. Markus provided access and polish. He slipped her into the rooms where the real games were played. The unpublicized dinners, the invitation-only retreats, the after-parties where deals were whispered, not signed. Within months, Meghan's orbit began to shift. She was no longer the actress from Suits who posed for lifestyle blogs. She was becoming the woman everyone in the London social circuit wanted to know. Markus had rewritten her guest list, and behind every flattering headline, every photo from an elite gathering, his shadow lingered. To the untrained eye, it was luck. But those who watched closely knew it was choreography. Markus wasn't introducing Meghan to society. He was rebranding her for it. Through Soho House, he connected her with fashion designers who dressed her for visibility, philanthropists who gave her purpose, and financiers who understood the power of association. The Meghan Markle who would one day walk into Kensington Palace wasn't born. She was constructed, one calculated evening at a time, and then came that weekend. The one at Soho Farmhouse, the lush countryside retreats so exclusive, even royals booked under aliases. According to insiders, it was there, during a private event quietly coordinated by Markus himself, that Meghan met Prince Harry. It wasn't a random encounter. It was placement, the right faces, the right setting, and a man whose entire career, revolved around orchestrating moments that looked like miracles. From that moment on, the fairy tale wrote itself. Or so it seemed. But those who knew Markus understood that every narrative he touched had a structure. He believed in timing, in patience, in leverage. He'd built careers from whispers and buried others with a single exclusion from his inner circle. He didn't need a title. He had influence. And that influence now stood beside the man who would one day be king's son. While Meghan's fame skyrocketed, Markus remained her constant. The tabloids noticed it. The third wheel, they sneered. The shadow in every frame. But he was more than that. He was her stabilizer, her strategist, her silent advisor in a world that pretended to be ruled by protocol, but ran on perception. Wherever Meghan went, New York, London, Toronto, Markus wasn't far behind. He wasn't a servant or a sycophant. He was her mirror to the elite, the reminder that she belonged. Inside palace walls, however, Markus Anderson was an anomaly. He wasn't blue-blooded, wasn't aristocratic, and certainly wasn't deferential. Yet somehow, he managed to exist in royal proximity, attending pre-wedding gatherings, mingling with insiders, staying close, even after Meghan crossed from celebrity into duchess. To courtiers, it felt like a breach of centuries-old protocol. Who was this man, unvetted and unbound, who had her ear? Rumors began to stir. Some whispered that Markus was still pulling strings behind the scenes, shaping Meghan's PR moves, curating her social circle, even influencing decisions that should have remained strictly royal. Others argued he was simply loyal, a reminder of her old life in a new world that demanded conformity. Whatever the truth, his presence made the palace uncomfortable. And yet, Meghan never distanced herself. In public, she referred to him as a friend. In private, sources say he was something more essential, a lifeline. In a monarchy obsessed with hierarchy and silence, Markus offered something different: familiarity, freedom, and perspective. To Meghan, that loyalty was rare. To the royals, it was dangerous. The tension only deepened as her marriage to Prince Harry attracted more scrutiny. Every friend, every past connection, every photograph became fuel for tabloids. And through it all, Markus stayed silent. That silence, however, became its own story. Why wasn't he defending her? Why wasn't he clarifying? Why wasn't he speaking? In the absence of answers, the headlines filled the void. Then came the whispers. A leak, as the tabloids called it. An unnamed source allegedly tied to Markus had revealed fragments of conversation, hinting at undisclosed truths about Meghan's rise and the depth of their bond. It wasn't explosive, not at first, just a sentence here, a remark there. But in the royal world, even a whisper can detonate like dynamite. Within hours, British tabloids erupted. Headlines screamed betrayal. Editors circled like vultures. Meghan's team scrambled into crisis mode, tracing every rumor, every connection, every possible trail that led back to Markus. For years, he'd been the silent guardian of her image. Now, his name had become the spark, threatening to burn it down. The palace called it containment. Meghan's PR staff called it damage control. But behind closed doors, it was chaos. Phones buzzed at midnight. Lawyers were briefed. Every publication that mentioned Markus was quietly contacted, persuaded, or pressured to soften the language. And in the middle of it all, Meghan faced a realization more painful than any headline. Her closest friend had become her greatest liability. But Markus Anderson didn't issue statements. He didn't deny, didn't confirm, didn't flinch. His silence was total. And that silence, that calculated restraint, was the one thing no crisis manager could control. Because when a man like Markus doesn't speak, everyone else does. Old photos resurfaced. The two of them at cocktail parties, traveling together, whispering at events. Each image was twisted into a new theory, a new scandal. Some said he was her secret handler. Others said he was her moral compass. But nobody really knew, and Markus wasn't about to tell them. Inside Buckingham Palace, aides feared something more than gossip. They feared exposure. Markus wasn't a royal insider, but he'd seen things, heard things. Conversations never meant for public ears. If he decided to speak, even off the record, he could unravel the fragile narrative holding the monarchy together. To them, Markus wasn't just a friend. He was a threat wrapped in discretion. By now, Meghan was trapped between two fires: loyalty and survival. If she defended him, she'd confirm his influence. If she distanced herself, she'd look ungrateful, cold, or worse, guilty. And so, she did what royals are trained to do. She smiled, said nothing, and pretended everything was fine. But behind the curated calm, the trust that once bound her to Markus began to fracture. Weeks turned into months, and the story refused to die. Each new article painted Markus as the mysterious puppet master, each headline pushing Meghan deeper into isolation. The irony was cruel. The man who had built her ascent was now being portrayed as the architect of her downfall. And yet, through the noise, one truth lingered quietly, almost invisible. Markus Anderson had never sold a story. He had never published a tell-all, never written a memoir, never even granted a single interview. In an age where everyone monetized proximity, Markus monetized silence. Still, silence can be mistaken for guilt. And in Meghan's world, a world where perception means power, guilt was contagious. It was around this time that the narrative began to shift. Royal commentators started using words like parasite, third wheel, hanger-on. What they didn't understand was that Markus wasn't clinging to Meghan. He was protecting her, perhaps too well. He'd made himself a lightning rod to absorb the strikes meant for her. But the palace didn't see loyalty. They saw intrusion. Behind those ornate gates, hierarchy matters more than heart. Outsiders are tolerated until they become inconvenient. And Markus, the self-made Canadian who'd walked past velvet ropes his whole life, had finally crossed one that wouldn't open again. But before he disappeared, before the press turned him into a ghost, Markus Anderson did something no one expected. He let something slip, a sentence, overheard during a private industry event, that hinted at truths the world wasn't ready to hear. When Markus Anderson finally resurfaced, it wasn't in a magazine spread or a tell-all interview. There was no exclusive deal, no dramatic confession under studio lights. Instead, it was a quiet evening gathering. One of those closed-door events where the powerful pretend to be casual. Someone recorded his words. A few minutes of calm, measured reflection that would ripple through London and Los Angeles like a ghost returning from exile. He didn't name Meghan. He didn't name the royals. But his tone carried the weight of a man who'd seen too much and said too little for too long. People think they know her, he said softly. But they only ever see what they're allowed to see. The rest, they invent. It wasn't an accusation. It was an autopsy of perception, loyalty, and the public's hunger for blood. For years, Markus had been accused of being her puppet master, her secret handler, the mysterious force behind her climb, from actress to duchess. But in that moment, he sounded more like a man mourning what ambition destroys. Friendship, trust, and the fragile line between strategy and sincerity. Insiders called it a truth bomb wrapped in diplomacy. The palace called it reckless. And Meghan, she stayed silent, because even though Markus hadn't betrayed her, he'd reopened a wound that never really healed. The world remembered the rumors, the insinuations, the images of them laughing, whispering, plotting. Every outlet spun it differently. Was this confession redemption or revenge? For Meghan, it didn't matter. The damage was done. In the royal sphere, silence is safety. Reflection is rebellion. Marcus had spoken softly, but the echo was thunder. Behind the polished doors of Montecito, where Meghan and Harry had built their post-royal refuge, tension hardened into resignation. Harry, ever the soldier turned exile, reportedly asked one question. Why now? Because timing was everything in their war with perception. The couple had just begun rebuilding their image. Philanthropy, production deals, reinvention. And now the ghost of Soho House had wandered back into the story, to the tabloids. Marcus's words confirmed their favorite theory, that Meghan's rise was never organic, that it was orchestrated, optimized, calculated. The fairy tale was rewritten as a screenplay, and Marcus, willingly or not, became its reluctant narrator. But there was another side to the story, one the headlines ignored. For all his power and access, Markus Anderson had never cashed in on his proximity to the royal couple. He could have made millions. He could have written the book, sold the photos, and joined the global chorus of opportunists who trade loyalty for clicks. But he didn't. His silence wasn't just discretion. It was devotion. Yet even devotion has a price. After his statement leaked, Marcus vanished again. No photos, no sightings, no digital trace. It was as if he'd folded himself back into the fabric of secrecy he once mastered. Those who knew him said it was deliberate, an exit designed to protect both their reputations before the next storm. Because in the royal world, even loyalty has an expiration date. Meanwhile, Meghan's circle shrank to a handful of names she could still trust. The glamorous brunches, the hidden weekend escapes, the open-door friendships. Gone. Every connection now came with calculation. Every smile required strategy. The woman who once glided through elite circles now moved like someone scanning for betrayal in every reflection. And perhaps that was Marcus's unintended gift. To remind her what the crown truly costs. Not jewels, not criticism, not duty, but people, the ones who once stood beside you, until the light became too blinding to bear. For the royal institution, Marcus's reappearance was a reminder of their greatest fear, that outsiders always remember what insiders forget. The monarchy thrives on silence, on keeping the machinery hidden beneath ceremony. But Marcus had lived in both worlds, the glamour of Soho and the rigidity of Windsor, and his very existence blurred the border between them. If there's one thing power cannot tolerate, it's ambiguity. And Markus Anderson was nothing if not ambiguous. In the months that followed, Meghan quietly restructured her public image again. Fewer social appearances, more curated interviews, softer rhetoric. The message was subtle but clear. Control the story or be destroyed by it. She and Harry doubled down on their narrative. Two lovers against the institution, two survivors of scrutiny. And yet, between the lines, there was always the shadow of the man who'd once opened the gates to that world. Marcus didn't need to speak again. His single reappearance had said enough. In some ways, his restraint only amplified the mythology around him. The man who built an empire of access and then disappeared before the cameras arrived. To some, he was a manipulator. To others, a martyr. To Meghan, perhaps, a mirror she could no longer look into. Because in truth, Marcus and Meghan were mirrors of each other. Both self-made, both hungry for belonging, both masters of reinvention. He taught her that power is not given. It's hosted, like an exclusive event. You curate it, you invite it, and you make sure everyone believes they need you to enter. The tragedy was that in her pursuit of that power, she became the very kind of myth Marcus used to construct for others. Years later, when the tabloids had moved on and the monarchy found new scandals to devour, Their story lingered like a ghost in the digital archives. The Duchess and the social architect, not enemies, not lovers, just two people who understood the price of ambition too well to ever speak of it again, because some friendships don't end with betrayal. They end with understanding, the kind that doesn't need words, only silence. And maybe that was Markus Anderson's final act of loyalty, to let the world invent its own version of the truth, while he and Meghan carried the real one to their graves. The headlines will remember him as the man who broke his silence. But those who listen closely know he never truly did. His confession was never about exposing Meghan. It was about exposing the machinery that created her. The glittering, ruthless system that turns ordinary people into myths and then punishes them for believing in their own illusion. For Markus, it was closure. For Meghan, it was a reminder that no crown, no platform, no brand can rewrite what's already etched into memory. Because power, once tasted, never really leaves you. It only changes hands. And as Markus Anderson's name faded once more into silence, one truth remained. He had been there when Meghan's story began, and he would always be part of it, unseen, uncredited, but essential, not as her downfall, but as her architect.